Hello and welcome to Cymera, Britain's only book festival celebrating science fiction, fantasy and horror writing. My name is Anne Landman and I'm the festival's founder and artistic director. Right about now, I'd hope to be welcoming you to beautiful Edinburgh, to our venue The Pleasance, for a weekend packed with events. Writing workshop, panels, readings, open mics, a quiz, a ceilidh, 2 plays. We had so much in store for you. Thank you for joining us online instead, to be part of our programme from the safety of your homes. We're very excited to still bring you a fantastic lineup of speakers. We'd ask you that you support our speakers, and there's many ways you can do that. You can buy their books or borrow them from the library. You can donate to them directly via their Patreon or Ko-fi. You will find the links for that below in the description. We encourage you to buy a ticket for our events, even the pre-recorded ones. All ticket money will go directly to our speakers. You can also donate to the festival, and all donations via the donation page will be split between our speakers, once we've covered our costs like the Zoom account. Thank you again for joining us in this brave new world of digital events. We hope you have a chance to check out all 33 of ours over the weekend. Please let us know what you think of them. Do get in touch via social media, the chat function in Zoom, or drop us an email on info@chimerafestival.co.uk. We'd love to hear from you. We hope you have a fantastic weekend, and we look forward to seeing you in person next year for Cymera 2021.
Right. Well, hello, morning, and welcome to this Cymera 2020 session entitled Expanding Universes. In this case, when we refer to expanding universes, what we specifically have in mind are tie-ins to particular franchises and the treatment in various media, which include, but are definitely not restricted to, novelizations and the like. My name's Carl McBride, and with me to discuss this are 2 novelists with lots and lots of experience in this area. McCormack is a New York Times bestselling author who has written both novels and audio adventures for a number of well-known franchises, including Star Trek, Doctor Who, and Blake 7. Most recently, she wrote the official tie-in prequel to the Amazon TV series Picard, which I'm sure she'll be talking about in a second. Also with me is Adam Christopher. Adam has also written tie-ins for a number of properties across different media, including Star Wars, the Elementary TV series, and the Dishonored video game series. Most recently, Adam has written a tie-in novel for the Netflix TV series Stranger Things, which is also a prequel, and which details Chief Jim Hopper's previous career as a homicide cop in 1970s New York. So, Una and Adam, welcome. Thanks for joining us today.
Hello.
And shall we just get straight into it? I think I'd like to ask you, how did you both get involved in writing tie-ins to begin with?
Well, a man asked me to. I was so I'm a long-time fan fiction writer, and I was sort of quietly, sort of from a kid, kind of like 7 Stickman cartoons, sort of level of fan fiction, playground games. Carried on just writing stuff. Internet arrived. I was writing Deep Space Nine fan fiction, and out of the blue, I got an email from a guy called Marco Palmieri, who was the Star Trek books commissioning editor at Simon & Schuster, and he said, "I've had your stuff recommended. Would you like to pitch some ideas?" And fell off my chair. Very great excitement. Yes, please. That would be extremely nice. And it went from there. So I got a door opened for me, which I don't think is a very usual experience. I think often people, particularly with Star Trek, because it's kind of come back on people are kind of hammering at the door. So I was very lucky in terms of timing. Where my writing was, they got quite decent by then, that I was kind of commissionable for a short story, and then on the back of that a novella, and then on the back of a novel. And I think Adam probably agree, once you've got a bit of a track record in this, people will come to you because they know that you can deliver in very, very, very tight schedules. So that's my story. A man knocked on the door and asked me to do it. or my inbox rather. Not the door, that'd be really creepy. But Adam, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing we'll probably come back to is the fact that you have to kind of have that experience behind you before you get the opportunity to do sort of licensed work. But like my first kind of intro to it, again, like you, I was a fan fiction writer, and I wrote, I wanted to be a writer because of Doctor Who, and the first stuff that I ever wrote and ever published was Doctor Who fan fiction. And then from that I became a sort of a writer. And my intro to kind of tie-in work was kind of weird. A publisher in the UK had bought a space opera trilogy that I'd written. And I went down to London and kind of, as you do, had lunch with them and toasted our success and wasn't it wonderful and all this kind of stuff. And a couple of the editors were talking about Elementary, which is that CBS TV show, which is Johnny Lee Miller and Lucy Liu as a kind of modern day Sherlock Holmes. And I kind of caught the end of the conversation because I was a huge Elementary fan. And I, having grown up with that kind of Doctor Who experience, which at the time in the kind of the 80s and 90s, like Doctor Who tie-in, my Doctor Who experience was mostly through Target books and New Adventures and things. So like I really wanted to do tie-in work. So I kind of said, oh, Elementary, I'm a big fan of Elementary, that sounds amazing. And they were like, I know, we've got 3 books, it's all tied up and all this kind of stuff. I was like, oh, that's a shame. And then I kind of went away and was doing my own thing. And my agent kind of got in touch about 6 weeks later to say, do you still want to do Elementary? To which I was like, yes, absolutely. So something had gone wrong somewhere with their schedule and they needed an Elementary book like pronto. So
that sounds very familiar.
Yeah. So with this one, it was like I had to do. So I did a synopsis and a sample chapter, which had to include the main characters as like an audition kind of piece, and that was sent off to CBS, and they said, "Yep, great, do it." And I had 3 weeks to write the first novel, which is like 90,000 words. So I was kind of in at the deep end. But then, like you say, yeah.
I've not had to do one in that tight turnaround. I have that. That's no, I can't double down on that one. That's really, really tough. 3 weeks.
It goes, yeah, but that's back to what you were saying before about how to get the opportunity to do tie-in books, you really have to have that experience behind you. Like at that point, I'd written probably or had published 4 or 5 novels. So they needed someone that could work to a schedule, to deliver to a deadline that was crazy. And that they knew could actually finish a book that was, publishable, basically. Because a lot of people, I meet at conventions, they really want to write a Star Wars story or a Doctor Who story, even though I've never written Doctor Who. Weirdly, also, they want to write Elementary, which I find strange because there's a very niche kind of fan base. But again, they were like me when I was starting out writing my fan fiction in the kind of 90s. It's like, you need to have built up experience, and not necessarily in terms of having a fan base or selling loads of books or anything, but just the fact that they know that you can do the work on time, you can follow the brief. Because writing a book is quite difficult, I guess.
It's not coal mining, is it? But you've got to put the hours in, I think. And I don't know about you, the first long piece I wrote was 30,000 words, and that took me a year.
Wow.
So that's like my first, and then when you think, well, actually, and that I think is pretty standard for somebody's first long piece of work, in your early 20s or whatever. And then if actually what the job involves is somebody saying, can we have 90,000 words, 3 weeks? How about that? You've got to have had you wouldn't run a marathon from nowhere.
Right.
And you wouldn't try and write 90,000 words without having done it before, because you're able to go, okay, right, 90,000 words. Well, let's make that 12 chapters. 90,000 divided by 12. And how many days do I have? And how much can I do in an hour? And you've got to have a fairly solid first draft style as well, I think. So it's I've never had to turn it around that quickly, but you've got to have that kind of up and running.
And I remember Terrence Dicks, who obviously wrote a lot of Doctor Who and was a script editor, he had this great thing that he said back when they were doing the New Adventures. This is in the 90s, because obviously a lot of Doctor Who fans wanted to write Doctor Who books, and the New Adventures had this kind of open door policy where you could submit stories even if you're, not a published author. But he said, if you don't want to write a Doctor Who book, you want to write a book.
Yeah.
And this is the thing when people come up to me and say, I'd really like to write an elementary book. Can you introduce me to the editor? And it's like, I appreciate the fact that like you're a fan and you want to get into writing for a property, which is this amazing kind of thing we get to do. But yeah, if the first thing you've written is 30,000 words and that took a year, it's going to be an impossible task, I think.
And that's why I think it's, whenever I tell this story at Trek Convention, I'm usually with my friend Jim Swallow, and he says, so I want to stop here and I want to say to you, really, 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 this doesn't happen. Okay, this is not how it usually happens. You don't get commissioned. And in fact, my first commission was a short story, and then I was commissioned for a novella, and then we did a novel on the back of that. So even then, even though I was through the door, it was well, can she deliver this? Can she deliver something at 30 to 40,000? Okay, let's commission for. A novel would usually be commissioned at about 80 to 100k, wouldn't it? But they'd probably want something between 90 rising to 100, I think. So yeah, even then, it was not straight in at a novel.
You've both worked on tie-ins for quite a few different properties. Do you have any preferences where there are properties that you specifically aim for, and other? Is it an element of choice, or is it just who comes knocking on your door with work, basically?
I think it sounds kind of weird, but like you get to a point where you have to be picky about the kind of things you want to work on, in terms of the fact that you're limited time to devote to projects like that. So I kind of like I've done Elementary, Dishonored, Stranger Things, Star Wars. So people I do get approaches for doing other kinds of tie-ins, but I really had to kind of weigh it up. Is that something that I'm really interested in? Is it because there are lots of very small properties, and obviously they're very keen to get experienced writers, but you kind of wonder if it's really worth it. The other thing with tie-ins, which is different to sort of original fiction, is that it's called work for hire. You are, as a writer, you're hired, you get paid for it, but you don't own the copyright, you don't own the characters. If you get royalties and sales, it's usually at a very reduced rate compared to sort of original work. So all those kind of things you have to take into consideration. So I've become a bit kind of choosy. How about you, Una?
Same thing. I mean, I've been lucky that kind of the offers I've had, particularly recently, have just been really, really fantastic ones. So getting to do the Picard book obviously was one I just leapt to do. And then I think some of the Doctor Who stuff that I've been doing as well. So we just announced this big Time Lord Victorious project, and that's been really, really high profile. And so this was all work that I was offered, and I thought I can't turn down the first Picard novel.
Well, no, there's stuff that you will like, even if you're busy with other stuff and your schedule is full, you will drop everything. Yeah.
That's it for the next. That was quite a rapid turnaround, not as quick as 3 weeks, but that was one where you just go, yep, drop everything, ring people up, tell it's going to be another month, or I don't start on that original novel again this month. That one can wait. Clear everything. Make this one a top priority. So some work is just completely irresistible, and then some work you're sort of thinking, well, I do need to pay the bills this month, so I'll do some smaller projects because I know they pay reliably, and I know that they're going to come through, and I know roughly how long they're going to take me to do. So Big Finish audio plays a real kind of, they're just a good, because not only are they massive fun, they're a great company to work for, very reliable, and you've built up good relationships with people. So I guess it's exactly as Adam says. It's trying to, like any other job, it's a freelance job, it's balancing what you can actually do in the time available. how much you can take the mick out of people in terms of, can we just stretch that one a bit so I can fit this one in? And then if offers like Picard come along, you just say yes, absolutely, immediately. Yeah.
And also, like, I did a story for the Star Wars 40th anniversary anthology, from a certain point of view, sort of 2017.
Yeah.
And that was a charity anthology, so like I didn't get paid at all.
Yeah.
But when someone emails you and saying, "Do you want to write a Star Wars story?" You're like, "Absolutely, yes."
I wish someone had emailed me and say that. They've never done that. Would you like to say yes?
No one's ever asked me to write Doctor Who either. And
That's
Doctor
true.
Who
We have this conversation every time we meet, don't we? We kind of grumble.
Absolutely.
They come knocking at my door. So, but I feel like it's one of the big three, Doctor Who, Star Trek, Star Wars. I feel yeah. Once you've ticked that, you kind of go, yes.
Which is then interesting because, as you're saying, like other stuff that comes in and you get asked to write it, you're like, well, if you want to split your time between one of the big three or something which you're maybe not such a huge fan of, or they don't pay as well, which, like, when you're talking about money in terms of this kind of thing, it sounds kind of weird because it's a creative art, but because it's this work for hire system where it is a job that you are hired to do, you're running a business, you have to kind of think about those things.
And there are things that I would not take because I just don't know the show well enough. I would look, surely there's somebody who's just as fast, who can do this better, because you would have to, part of what your time to do the job well and to do it in a way that people would actually enjoy reading it, you would need to immerse yourself in something that perhaps you haven't watched for a long time, or you've not quite caught up on the most recent season. So there are some that you would say, okay, well, I'm going to build that into the writing time, but there would be other universes, franchises that you would say, I just can't get up to speed on this on time, to make it something that people would enjoy, to have that kind of full immersion that they want. Or would, because if you love a show, you'll watch it, but to then go and read and buy and read a franchise novel is an extra level of investment in something. And I would want to feel that a writer was bringing that kind of immersion and joy to it as well. So yeah, that would be another reason for saying I'll pass on that one, I think. So Stranger Things I couldn't do, for example, because I've just not watched enough. I've watched maybe because there's so much television.
Well, like I could never have written Elementary in 3 weeks if I hadn't been watching the show from the start. And I had an investment that was more than just a casual viewer.
Yes, exactly.
I understood the show.
If somebody rang me up today, please God, and said, would you like to do the first spin-off from the new Lord of the Rings TV series, I could probably turn that around. Oh God!
Yeah, exactly.
No sweats. Yeah. So if you were, and that's where I think the kind of fan fiction background comes in handy. That full immersion, you're kind of up and running with something. But so yeah, all of that is to say, the projects you're weighing up on.
Yeah, but like, just to go back to what you said, readers, because the tie-ins on top of an existing franchise are kind of an extra little thing or extra big thing for a certain part of the kind of fan base.
Yeah.
And they go in with an expectation that you are bringing the same kind of level that they have to the work. So that's not like the distinction between fan fiction and the kind of professional fan fiction, which is kind of what it is, really. It's
yeah.
But with Stranger Things, there's still, I had to do a ton of research, and mostly because of the period setting of it is quite difficult. But you can kind of get into discussions with the showrunners and the producers and things, and in some instances you discover you know more than they do. Like with Elementary, it was like they compiled, it was Dishonored, the video game series I did as well. They took all my emails and like made a little kind of dossier.
Wow.
And added it to the kind of the World Bible sort of thing.
Consultancy fees.
Well, that'd be nice.
We talk a little bit about the inception of a tie-in project. Then, when you get a commission, do you pitch a concept, or do they tell you roughly what you want to do? For Picard, did you get story beats?
Yeah, that really depends on that. So there are lots of variables going on there. It depends how big a property it is, whether it's in production, because I was a lot of my Star Trek books were when the shows were completely off air. So some of my earlier Trek novels, it really was a case of, what would you like to do? I'd go, I don't know, should we do the Italian Job? Yeah, okay, all right, that sounds good. Or do you mind if I do this? I want to do this, and this with kind of the Cardassian books. But with Picard, it was very clear that we wanted a prequel novel, where it was set, what the kind of arc of his story was going to be, because it had to lead into the start of the show. And it was like being in the writers' room. I was having scripts coming through. I was working very closely with Kirsten Bayer, who's the co-creator, and they're in the writers' room, and she's kind of the liaison between the writers' room and the franchise material. So that was very, very closely involved in seeing where the show was heading, where it was going, what the story needed to be, because it wanted to feel a kind of seamless prequel to what was going on air. So that was very tightly involved. But other cases, so even with the Doctor Who novels, I've maybe had someone come to me and say, well, we've got a slot for a Matt Smith book. The first one, we're doing 3. The first one's like this. The third one's like this. You're in the middle. We want something spooky and contemporary. Come back and tell us some, paragraph ideas. So there you've got a kind of general note, a sort of tone note, and you just go off and kind of say, well, this, and this. And they go, well, we like that one, work that one up into an outline. So I think it really depends on where the show is, whether it's on air, whether it's quite high profile, whether it's part of a range, whether it's going to be the kind of one book that's coming out. So your freedom and your kind of room to maneuver changes, but it's differently fun, if you see what I mean. Freedom to do whatever you like is a great deal of fun, but freedom to kind of sort of working with a team to craft something that's going to work within the confines of a show, equally fun as well. So it depends is the answer to that, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's right. My experience has been certainly, well, if you look at a property that's in production, so when I was doing Elementary, Stranger Things, and actually Dishonored as well, those were things that are ongoing in production, and the people behind the scenes, they know what they want. If they're doing tie-ins, whether it's a comic or a novel or something, they generally have an idea of the function that they want that to fulfill,
yeah,
in relation to the actual thing, the main thing that's going on. So for Stranger Things, they've needed a Hopper prequel novel. So that had a very specific slot to fit into. But apart from that, well, it had to be set in New York City, it had to be set in the 70s, and they wanted him to be chasing a serial killer. But that was it. And I think the best kind of tie-in projects are the ones where they kind of give you that freedom, because they're busy with the production of the actual thing that this, whatever it is going to be based on. They're busy doing that. They need to kind of offload as much as they can to people that they can trust to do the work that is asked of them. And this is not just the writer, but also the editors at the publishing houses as well. They need to be able to kind of move that on to someone else, knowing that they can produce what is required and devote their time to making the show. For Elementary, it was kind of a bit easier, because it was those books, there's 2 of them, they're kind of extended episodes. You can kind of slot them into the series. They're like, I kind of treated them like the kind of mid-season 2-episode special kind of thing, because obviously they're kind of longer than a regular episode. For Dishonored, which is slightly more complicated because it's a video game series, there was 3 games, and when I was doing the first book, it was going to be there's a gap of like 15 years between in game time between the first game and the second game. The second game, which they were making at the time, and my first novel was going to fit between, bridge that gap between 1 and 2, and then the second novel was between 2 and 3, and then the third novel was after the third game. So they knew what they wanted, but with the video game, because there's so many different people involved, there's a narrative director, there's the story director, there's a game design director, there's the overall producers. So they actually flew me out to Lyon in France probably about 4 times, which is great. And I got to hang out at Arcane Studios with, these fairly, like Harvey Smith, who was the narrative director. Like, he's a known person in kind of video games. He developed a lot of high profile stuff, and we just kind of hang out and breaking down the story over a couple of days. Which is like, that was the most kind of hands-on experience I've had. Elementary, so long as the showrunner knew that I knew what I was doing, they kind of left me alone. And then Stranger Things was kind of a bit in between, because I worked with one of the kind of staff writers, because this book, although it was set in the 70s, it was taking place, I think there's kind of like a present day framing sequence which takes place between seasons 1 and 2, or 2 and 3. I can't remember now. So I had to kind of make sure that the present day stuff actually led into the stuff on TV. So there was a more active kind of not supervision, but collaboration, really.
So with that in mind,
I've got flown to Lyon. I've got to work on that one.
What's that?
I'm to aspire to.
It was great. It's like, this is living the dream, right? I got to play video games, for a few days.
Awesome.
Get paid to do it. Great.
No, it's mad.
So you're working to very tight deadlines, as we've established. What's your workflow like once you get a commission? How many drafts do you do? Tell us how you break it down and just how it works for you. Bear in mind you've got to liaise with all these people as well.
I'm generally so with the Picard book, for example, we worked up the commission was for 1,000-word novel, 100,000 word novel. In my dreams, 100,000 word novel, 100K. So we worked up a 10,000 word outline, which was chapter breakdowns, and really that's a lot of the work done for you. If you're quite solid on what the chapters are, what the good old 3-act story structure, that's solid, isn't it? That'll do the job. That'll deliver a story. So rely on these things that are tried and tested and will help you, and then variations in the theme will help you through and make it exciting and interesting and engaging. But we had 100,000 words. We worked up a 10,000 word outline that everyone was happy with, and then it was go away and Godspeed. We hope you get it done. I was quite relaxed because we'd had quite we'd really worked on this and invested a lot of kind of creative work in hammering this out, and scripts were still coming in, but we designed something that would be minimally impacted by changes in what was happening on the show. So we hammered this. It was a really good, solid outline. I just had to sit down and put the hours in, which is, just sitting down at the keyboard every morning and then, trying to get a good solid block of work down, have confidence in my sort of first draft style. I think as you get more experience as a writer, when you're writing a bad sentence and you go, well, that's clearly rubbish. So, let's kind of edit on the fly, because you get more practiced at that, or just flag it up and go, well, I'm going to have to think of that. Lots of bits where you go, put in techno babble here, or explain plot here, and then you get used to bits that you need to plug in later. And the other thing that maybe you find this as well, you can't indulge yourself by just writing the bits that you want to write. You have to actually write those scenes that you're not. I'm not very invested in action scenes. I'm much more invested in talk and philosophizing and debate and discussion and narration. But there are going to be action scenes, and I do just have to sit and write them. They have to be done. So you can't skimp on the bits that need to be there for the story to function. But it's just putting the hours in. I think, like anything, it's like, people who are listening who've done on projects like PhDs, you just have to sit and put in the hours and deliver a piece of work. But quite quickly.
One of the characteristics of licensed work is this kind of heavy outlining at the beginning.
Yeah.
I mean, it's obviously it's useful as when you come to write the draft because you've got a very strong, long structure to work from. But one of the reasons why it has to be done is because there are usually so many people who have to read and approve.
Yeah.
And especially for an ongoing thing like Stranger Things or Picard, like it's important that you get it right and it has to fit exactly. So kind of my Stranger Things outline was probably about the same, I think, maybe 10,000 words. I've just done an outline for something and I don't have the word count, but it's like 18 pages as a Word document.
Yeah.
But again, it's because like there are so many people who are going to look at this at all different levels. I remember getting back, was it edits on something, might have been Elementary, and the track changes. There was probably 20 different people that I'd never heard of putting in comments and stuff, all different levels of kind of CBS executives. Because so definitely a very long outline, very detailed outline, which then all those hours that you put into that, and like you fine tune it with the showrunners or the producers or editors or whatever till it gets the final approval, and then you can start writing, which makes it easier because again you've got usually a much sort of abbreviated time frame to actually write the draft. Like if you're doing your own work, if you're lucky, you can kind of drift a little bit and you can go off on tangents, and the deadline is usually 6 months, a year away. This is like, well, you're on the clock and you have to put the hours in. It's funny, you mentioned action scenes. I don't like writing action scenes. I find them incredibly difficult. But then when I read them back, they seem to kind of work. And I think I learned this with Dishonored because like it's a video game, a narrative video game. The series is based on the fact it's like a steampunk kind of universe, and you are an assassin, a royal assassin your missions are to kill lots of people. Or you can do it non-lethally, which is a kind of unique twist on it. But I wanted to make sure I had put a flavor of the kind of gameplay into the books, which is not something that you kind of normally would do for like a TV show. I mean, TV show or a film franchise, you need the kind of look and feel. But like a video game, I was like, well, what am I going to do? So I wrote some action sequences that were kind of like how you do it in the game if you had to, and it was so difficult. There's action, like it's visually fantastic, but in the written word, like what do you do? But I think it worked out okay. And then like Stranger Things, being a cop in 70s New York, which is a very bad place, there's plenty of action involved. But yeah, and again, just put the hours in. I definitely have a much more rigid schedule and block my time out as opposed to when I'm doing original novels.
And block it down to, right, this scene has got to be done today, and or these two have got to be done, and I'll do that one this evening, and then and it's got to be. I can't waste time fiddling. I can't waste time fiddling with it. So it's got to be decent when it gets down on the page. So an intense period of time.
It's an interesting point because this goes back to the thing of having experience as a writer. Because we have to do it quickly. My first drafts are terrible, but my second draft is pretty much how it is in the book. And that's something that I have kind of just developed as my writing skills improved because I'd written so much fan fiction and had other books published. That is the way that I kind of work. And as for a tie-in, that's a really good advantage. And that's why also some writers, they don't want to do it. It doesn't suit them because that's just not the way they can work.
No. Some people just aren't out. If you don't like working with an outline, you're not going to enjoy this kind of work because it's as Adam said, you've got to do it because people want to look at it and want to know what the story is before they sign off on it. But also it's just how you get it done. So if you're not that kind of writer, you're not going to enjoy doing TV tie-in. I happen to be that kind of writer, so I really enjoy it. So, yeah. Also, writing's really hard work, and I sort of want to do it as quickly as I can, as well as I can. But if I can do it, I've got that done now. So I've got that done, and I'm pleased with it. And now I can go and play Pokemon Go or watch some television, or this kind of thing. So you got to do my job, get it done. So so you want to be, you've got to do it quickly. Yeah.
What about fan service? We talked briefly about that when you're writing, and the interface between being professional fan fiction, as Adam says. Is there stuff as fans you want to get into the books, or is there a temptation as writers to stretch the format sometimes to kind of take it in different directions, or do you feel very much that it's a job and you want to kind of stick to the formula as much as possible? How do you approach them in that way?
I think there's a danger when you're a fan of something of kind of indulging that fanishness. One thing, Stranger Things, for example, I knew people were going to see this book on a bookshelf in a bookstore, and it's going to have the Stranger Things logo on it, and they're going to go, oh, it's got a picture of one of the main characters on the front. They're going to pick it up and read it. They're not necessarily going to be the most super fan kind of Stranger Things devotee. The way I approach it is that the books are they're for not a general audience, but people who are just kind of familiar with whatever the show is. They could pick it up and enjoy it as a book, regardless of the depth of their kind of knowledge of the property. So as a fan myself, I can put in some things which I know that fans will kind of get and enjoy, but not to the detriment of the story itself. I think when you have that kind of fan service stuff that you must understand in order to understand the rest of the story, that's kind of, you've crossed the line. And you kind of had to pull it back. I mean, I had stuff in Stranger Things I had to take out because they said, this is the editors and the producer said, this is actually too much. This is a bit too fan fiction-y, which, that's not an insult or not a disparaging thing to say. It's it's too much like fan fiction, because obviously we both started out with fan fiction and we still write it. But yeah, you have to have that awareness of you're going out to a wider audience, and there's just a line you have to keep behind.
I think that's fair. I think there's that's exactly the kind of line that I draw as well. That there's you want someone to pick this up and enjoy it, and they might not have seen as much as you. You're intensely involved in it, so you can't rely on a piece of some kind of plot revelation, relying on knowledge that because you've sat and watched that episode 15 times, and indeed that scene probably 30 times. Love it. No, you can't. People don't do that. People don't go around doing that. I mean, everyone I know does, because they're my friends. So you can't rely on that. So you can kind of put exposition in, or sort of come up with tricks to do it. But you want someone who's going, oh, I really like Stranger Things. I've never tried them. Oh, right, maybe I'll try this. This actually, I really love 70s cop stuff. So you want someone to be able to open that and read it. At the same time, you want people who do know exactly. I've watched that scene 30 times, in fact. You want them to feel that they're getting something from this book as well. So it's not easy, but you're trying to make as democratic a book as possible, I think. You want someone who knows the show well enough to be willing to pick up a Stranger Things or a whatever novel, but also people who have loved it and want to get something more, want more of the show. So you're kind of mediating between those two things. And everything at the end of the day just comes down to your authenticity as a writer and going, okay, all right, how can I make this as readable a book as possible, and convey some of my love and passion for this thing? Because I've got to the stage where I'm writing a TV diary novel. I've got to have some investment in this, these people, in this setting. So I think it's just being sensible as a writer. Though some of my Cardassia novels got pretty slashy, so kind of just went for it, I think. So yeah, you're straddling that line, I think. And even fan fiction readers, I sometimes get reviews that go, oh, I don't know the book really well. That kind of I'll have to go up and read on that bit. Though more often it's, I think you have missed. So yeah, you're straddling that line, I think.
I think also being fans, it helps with it helps in general, because when someone reads a book, like, okay, they pick up a Picard novel, they pick up a Stranger Things novel, there's an expectation they've got
Yeah.
of what the book is going to be like. So this is the thing I actually really enjoy about licensed fiction, because not only do you have to write a novel of 100,000 words, which is entertaining and coherent and has story logic, all of those things you have in a normal kind of original novel,
Yeah.
but you're using a setting, and sometimes you're using characters that not only already exist, but people love them
Yeah.
more than anything.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like a duty, I guess, to do the setting and the characters justice.
Yeah.
And you have to capture them precisely on the page, because
Yeah.
if you get it wrong, as soon as someone picks up a book, they're going to know.
Yeah.
They're going to go, that doesn't ring true. That's not what they do. That's not how they speak. That's not how they move. The stuff I've done, Dishonored, Stranger Things, Elementary, and also with Star Trek, we're lucky that we've got the performances on screen, and they're there for us to study. And I think it's a real kind of art to capture the performances of somebody else and capture their voice and style in a book form. That's why with Elementary they asked me to do an audition chapter which had the two main characters.
Yeah.
They needed to know that I could capture the performance that you see on screen of Johnny Lee Miller as Sherlock Holmes and Lucy Liu as Dr. Watson. Because again, if someone picked it up and it wasn't right, they'd know, and they'd tell you about it like pretty quickly.
Yeah, well, I think one of the reviews I got really broke my heart. Somebody said, "Oh, I picked up this book and it was the characterization of Miles O'Brien was so different that I burst into tears." Oh no, it felt awful. That's terrible. Because you can't always get it right, and you're probably 95% there. But if it just doesn't chime in some way, and it's the way she or he is invested in that character, that's it. I made them cry.
And I mean, some characters are easy to do, and some are not.
Yeah.
I remember with Elementary, I'm getting these confused now. With Stranger Things, 11, which is the Millie Bobby Brown's character, like she's a particular way of speaking and a particular way of behaving, which is difficult to kind of capture. And my editor and I went through a couple of episodes of season 2, I think, like scene by scene. And we were at the point where we were counting the syllables of her dialogue because she's so particular in the way that she speaks. Because the notes we were getting back from the showrunners, and this is kind of the end of the process where everything is kind of fine, but they're like, can you just go over this again because there's something not quite right? And it's like, yeah, I have to do my best to capture.
Did you put your finger on what it was that you were? Did you realize what it was? Was it?
Yes. Now, I was told she never uses subordinate conjunctions.
Okay.
Now I had to look that up. But as soon as it's things like, I think it's but or because or something like that. I mean, grammar's not the kind of mechanics of grammar. And I think I kind of did it. I kind of got it in the end. But that was a lot of work, but it was worth putting in the work because, again, it's like it has to be right. For someone like Hopper, he was way kind of easier because, like, I got his voice and he's got a particular swagger and the way he looks at things, and I kind of got that. And he was really fun. Like, he was really fun to write. 11 was really difficult to write, but I think in both instances, the end result kind of worked really well.
One of our, when I taught creative writing at university, one of our first year undergraduate courses was to get people to take their favourite writers and just a little chunk of maybe 200 or 300 words and analyse the sentence structure down to phrases like, subordinate clauses and make them think about how it worked. So, girls and boys, there is a practical business reason it genuinely being able to kind of I see what you mean actually works. It works in practice, so I just feel vindicated.
Well, when I was at high school in New Zealand doing English, I fell into the gap where they decided that grammar and rules of
Yeah.
grammar was not something to be taught.
Yep.
So I missed all of that. And then as soon as I left high school, they actually brought it all back in. So when it was like people talking about subordinate conjunctions, I was like, this is a foreign language to me. I have no idea what they're talking about.
I didn't have it in English, but I was on a sort of two-tier where English had kind of gone all fashionable, but I was also still doing Latin. So I kind of got, so all my knowledge of grammar is Latin grammar, which of course is not directly applicable to the English language, but it's kind of enough to fudge it.
Right.
So I kind of have this weird hybrid. And that was exactly why we introduced that course at undergraduate level, was that we had students coming through who were,
Right, interesting.
I don't know what a noun is, okay, right, well, here's what a noun is, that this might come in useful if you want to write for a living. So that was exactly why the course was there. And there you go, it does have practical benefits in a kind of sitting down with your draft and going, actually, that's not how they talk, that's not how their sentences work. So vindication.
Yeah.
How about canon? To sort of get back to the fan service thing, how much latitude do you have to add things? Do you get to add to the canon, or do you have to? How much do you bear it in mind? Do you kind of bear in mind that I can't do such and such thing in the book because these rules have been pre-established? Do you feel it a restriction, or do you kind of like the structure of it?
I think there are very simple things like, obviously you can't kill characters, yeah. But to be honest, it's not something that I think about when I'm writing. Usually we've defined the parameters of the story. So say with the prequel novel, the Picard novel, but I know that I can't do certain things because it's set at a certain time, so it won't make sense if I brought a character in here, or I didn't have a character here, or I had a certain kind of event happen. So mostly I'm driven by story sense. In Doctor Who, of course, the big thing is that there is no canon, so it isn't something I really think about. Within the Star Trek, the earlier Star Trek novels, the novel universe had got quite complex. So there were kind of ongoing narratives that were stretching over years. And there were phenomenal, really good fan sites that were kind of documenting this. Now, I couldn't keep all this in my head. So I would kind of rely on, again, I kind of outsource that brain work. I'd sort of corralled off an area of storytelling about Cardassia Prime, where I told stories and kind of built on that. So maybe wider events in that extended universe, I didn't have to rely on for storytelling. But I don't really think much about canon. I think if you're thinking more in terms of what's the best story we can tell, then questions of canon sort of naturally fall into place that. And I'm not really I want the big story where X dies, or it's all revealed to be this, or I'd rather the small story character beat stories are much more what I'm interested in. What do you think, Adam?
Yeah, I think you have rules that you have to work within. With an ongoing thing, and you're doing a tie-in, there is a certain distance anyway from what you're doing, because like Stranger Things is a TV show. That's like number one. That is what they're working on. That is going to go for however many seasons. Anything else is subordinate to that. So, they just want to make sure that you don't do anything which will impact them, not necessarily straight away, but like further down the line, if they decide to pursue whatever storyline, they kind of, if the tie-ins have got a distance, there's less chance of kind of a clash or a kind of continuity problem, which makes sense. To me, that's logical. You don't, as the tie-in, you don't want to be constraining the main property from doing something. So I think with Stranger, though, it is kind of cool from a fan point of view, because it's like, sometimes you sit back and think, I actually added a little something to this wider universe. In Stranger Things, I gave Jim Hopper's wife a job, which is like tiny.
Yeah.
But like she's an elementary school teacher. At the beginning of season 3, 11 has a walkie-talkie, and I give her the walkie-talkie in the book. And again, it's a microscopic detail, but like as a fan myself, I'm like, I made that tiny contribution to the actual canon.
And I guess my contribution to canon is that in Star Trek, the character of Number One is now officially called Una. So, so I have been canonized. That's I've, achievement unlocked. That's my contribution to canon.
Yeah, it's funny. At the moment, I am the only canonical part of the old Republic in Star Wars.
Oh wow!
Like me personally, which is kind
Good.
of like, but this is not something that I did myself. Obviously, this is something else someone did, but
Elevated.
I have that claim to fame.
Hang on in there.
Okay. What about, you both work across media? Adam, you were talking about video games, and Una, you've done Big Finish audios. Are there different challenges to working in these different medium? Do you have to kind of approach different projects in different ways?
For me, everything builds up from the character. So, and I am quite a dialogue heavy writer anyway. I've got very auditory imagination rather than a very visual one. I don't really picture images. I really hear voices. So audio is a very natural medium for me. I mean, I'm primarily I like writing novels, but audio is very natural because I tend to write novels from the dialogue up. So then you've just got to. I think the tricky thing for me learning to write audio was conveying setting through sound, or conveying theme through sound, and learning those tricks and what you could and couldn't do. So I'll kind of skip that montage zoom, and because we are very even someone with a very poor visual imagination like me, we're very immersed in visual tricks of narrative. So to find the ways that you could do that just through sound was something that I had to learn to do. And they're very simple things like realizing that the recording booths at the studio they used, if they only had 5 booths. So if I had a 6th voice, that was actually a really difficult thing for them to be able to record. It's also probably a very messy scene as well. So to learn very practical constraints like that, which you don't have in a novel, you genuinely don't have any constraints at all, apart from your contracted length. So those sort of technical constraints, that was the first time I thought, okay, all right, there's actually different sort of boundaries to what I can do here. And writing for television must be the same, but multiplied, 100,000-fold budget requirements, costume requirements, timing requirements, all of these things. So I would say learning to play to my strengths, which are dialogue, but to learn how to tell story through sound was sort of the biggest thing I had to do with working for Big Finish. But it's all been great fun.
Adam, how about video games? Was there anything you had to learn?
Well, I mean, the Dishonored novels, they were still novels, although kind of based on this kind of video game franchise, which actually taught me quite a lot about kind of game narrative, how you tell a story through a game. So you're playing it as kind of first person, but it still has a kind of plot that you kind of follow. But I did an issue of Star Wars Adventures comic, which is the all ages comic from IDW. And what they asked for was, again, it's a kind of character piece. They asked for a character from the sequel trilogy, a minor character. So I picked one of my favorites, Tillerson Lyncher, who's a pilot who gets killed in The Last Jedi. And I wrote a kind of a little one-shot adventure with her. And it sounds kind of similar to Big Finish in a way, because with the comics, although there is a visual aspect, you're telling the story through dialogue. Because with modern comics especially, you don't have thought balloons. You keep captions to a minimum. So really it's dialogue. And although I've written comics before, I find it really helps with my dialogue when I come to prose, because I'm the opposite of Una. I've kind of got a visual imagination, and my dialogue is the hardest part in prose. So writing the comic, Star Wars Adventures, was really good because it kind of really sharpens my dialogue skills. And also in a comic, you have to consider like not syllables but like word count, because you have a limited space. in speech bubbles and word balloons. So you kind of got this real economy and efficiency of how to tell a complete story in dialogue using as fewer words as possible, which is, and again, it's like, it's still tie-in, it's still licensed because it was a Star Wars story, but it was a completely different kind of experience to writing just prose. Because again, in prose, even if you're working from a very strict outline to very strict parameters, you've still got a lot of freedom to kind of do what you want, within those boundaries.
Yeah. So where you're coming in the scene, or how much you kind of zoom straight into to an encounter between a handful of characters, or how much you narrate. Comics would be really interesting to try. I've not read enough to sort of know where to start, but I think it'd be a really interesting writing discipline. Yeah.
That's the thing, and see, I've never done a big finish, but again, it sounds like it's a useful experience, as a writer, to kind of do these different kind of forms, because it really makes you look at how you write, and how to understand how you write.
Yeah, yeah.
Which then translates into the kind of work you do, in future.
Exactly, like realizing that short stories I just find incredibly difficult, because I'm putting in all the imaginative work that I would need to put into a novel, and it takes about as long.
Yeah.
All right, if you're going to be quicker just to do the novel on this, this has been so much damn hard work. But short stories, I just can't get at all. But yeah, it flags to you what your own strengths and maybe your weaker elements are, and you want to mix it up as a writer, I think.
We're getting just about at the end now, so I'll just finish off with: are there any properties either of you haven't worked on yet which you'd like to? Is there anything on the wish list for either of you?
I think I sort of hinted Star Wars, though I don't really know enough about the Star Wars universe. I think it's more of a sort of feeling that I would have ticked it off. I'd love to do Firefly, and the other thing I would love to do, I think I hinted at this already, is I would love to do a Tolkien-based. I mean, I write a lot of Tolkien fan fiction, but I would like to do a sort of licensed, the Tolkien universe kind of novel. I'd absolutely love to do that.
So I wonder if that sort of thing is coming, because there hasn't been any licensed Tolkien stuff, but now with the new show coming and kind of the changes, that might be quite interesting. I've never done Doctor Who, so that's kind of my one thing to kind of tick off, although it sounds like I'm just making a list, but no, that's my first kind of fandom. So I've never done Doctor Who. I'd quite like to do World of Warcraft, which is probably the only video game that I've got enough, because I've been playing it for like 15 years. It's the only game I've got enough knowledge of that I could actually make a decent stab at the kind of lore. And again, it's a complicated kind of world. But yeah, that's probably my two, I think.
Yeah. Or now, since I've just finished watching it, She-Ra and the Princesses of Power.
This is the thing, like, I'd love to write things like Transformers and G.I. Joe and all these kind of indulgences.
That's what
from my childhood. Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. Bunk off one afternoon and do a kind of vignette or something and whack it up under, Christopher Adams or whatever.
Yeah, no one will ever guess.
So yeah, that's my wish list. Tolkien, Paramount. I think, I'd love to do that.
Great. Well, thanks very much to McCormack and Adam, Christopher. There's been a great session, and thanks for joining us, and thanks for everyone who tunes in to watch this. It's hope you're having a great festival. So thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.